welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be doing my July wrap-up. So I will say that I am filming this video a little bit early. It's the 23rd today. So there's a possibility that I probably will finish another book or two within this month, but I'm actually going to be going on holidays next week, so I'm not going to have time to film this video. So I'm going to be cutting this, I guess, wrap up a little bit early, and I'll just tack those books onto next month's wrap up, if that makes sense. So yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know that. But so far this month, I have finished 9 books. Some of them have been audiobooks and some of them have been physical reads. And I definitely did not get through the TBR that I wanted to get through this month. I always like create these lofty TBRs for myself, thinking I'm gonna have all this time to read, which I never do. But I was able to finish 9 so far, so that's pretty good. And the first book that I finally read, it's been on my TBR for such a long time, and I've had the book for such a long time, and I've been wanting to read it for such a long time, so I finally got around to reading Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. So at first, this one, I wasn't 100% sure how I was going to end up liking this. It took me a little while to get into it. I ended up rating it a 4 out of 5, and I did pick up the second book, Crooked Kingdom. So I did end up liking it quite a bit. And I ended up, like I said, it took me a little while to get into it, but I ended up really enjoying this cast of characters. And what I really liked about what Leigh Bardugo did is that she gave the characters a good enough voice that you really started to empathize with them and you really felt who they are. I think sometimes it can be hard for writers when they are writing like so many characters and you're seeing the book through each character's perspective. It can be hard sometimes for them to give enough backstory to make you feel like you really understand who the character is and you really start to care about the character. And Leigh Bardugo did a really great job with that. I actually, by the end of the book, I felt so connected to all of these characters, and I just wanted to see them succeed in this heist so much. So, you know, these characters are all embarking on this absolutely impossible heist, and in the beginning you're just kind of like, you know, indifferent to it. You're just interested, like, okay, are they going to be able to do this or not? But as the book goes on, you just start to learn more and more about each character and what is motivating them to do this, and you just start to really root for them, and you start to see how they all, like, all of their personalities kind of play off of each other, and how they all are going to be able to work together to make this happen, and you just want them to succeed. And you just feel so terrible for them because most of them have really horrible stories in their background that just make you love these characters and just feel sorry for them and just realize that if they are able to pull this heist off, that all of their lives could be completely different. So I ended up really enjoying this one, and I can't wait to get into the second book. And it's just a duology, I think. So I guess the last book. Next is a book that I had been waiting for forever to come out, and that is Shadow of Fog Island by Mariette Lindstein. I read the first book, The Cult on Fog Island, a few years ago, and I absolutely loved it. I've talked about it plenty of times on this channel as being one of my favorite thrillers of all time. And, you know, I've got to say, I was almost interested to maybe go back and reread The Cult on Fog Island, because this one seemed very different. Now, that being said, I did end up still giving it a 4, but I really kind of struggled my way through it. And it really read, I imagine that this is because this book is translated. Mariette Lindstein, I believe, is, I want to say she's German, but possibly, I want to say she's from Germany, but that's possibly not true. I know she's from Europe, like a country in Europe. I want to say Germany, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And so I know that this book is translated, so I'm assuming that that is why this read so different to me. And that's, like I said, I wanted to kind of go back and skim the first book to see if the first book was like this as well. It just came off as very amateur. That's the word that I'm looking for, amateur. Like maybe a high school student wrote this. Like it's a good idea. I liked the book, but just the writing style was very amateurish. And like I said, I'm assuming that that is because of how it was translated. So I don't know if she used a different translator for this book than the first one, because I don't remember the first one being that way, but my sister-in-law has the first one, so I wasn't able to go through and skim it. I lent it to her. So yeah, I don't remember the first one being like that or having those issues with it, but this one I kind of struggled with it a bit. Like it just felt like I wasn't reading a professional author's work. And it was a lot different than what I expected the book to be. And I will say there were some slow parts. This is definitely more of a slow burn thriller, where the first one was a little bit more fast paced, and this one kind of ramped up towards the end. And you kind of, it was a book where you kind of ended up knowing what was going to happen. There was really only one conclusion of what was going to end up happening in this book, but it still was interesting how they went about making that happen. And I'm curious to see if there's going to be a third one or not coming through this. I waited for years for this one to come. Like this one was published, once again, in Germany. I'm positive it's got to be Germany. Was published in Europe a couple of years ago already, and we had to wait until just last year to get it in Canada. So I am curious to see if there's going to be a third one. If there is, then I probably will be a couple more years until I can get my hands on that one. But yeah, overall I gave this one a 4. It basically I just realized I didn't even, and I've been talking about this book for how long and I didn't even say what it's about. So basically it follows Sophia. You know, in the first book, she ends up kind of accidentally getting herself involved in this cult and trying to escape it. And this is kind of dealing with the fallout from that. I'm not going to go too far into it because I don't want to ruin the first book for you. But yeah, basically this deals with the fallout from the first book. Okay, next is one that I was really excited to read once again, and that is the Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson. And I just, once again, I love cover of it. It's so cute. It looks so fun. And I gave this book a 3. It was not at all what I expected it to be, and I think that might be why I only gave it a 3. I mean, objectively, I would say probably a 3.5, but I lowered it to the 3 when why hasn't Goodreads like figured out to do the half stars yet? I don't understand. But basically, you know, I thought this book was going to be really, really fun. Just kind of like a fun, spooky read. And it ended up being a lot more deep, I guess. And it was more of a coming of age story than anything else. Like I thought it was going to be about, you know, these kids that are having this Saturday night ghost club and they're going ghost hunting with the one kid's uncle. And I just thought it was going to be a really fun, like spooky read. And yeah, it ended up dealing with a lot more coming of age things, you know, boys starting to notice girls and starting to realize that, you know, the family that they have idolized their entire lives are human and, you know, have problems and aren't perfect. And that's something that we all kind of go through at one time or another, is realizing, you know, that our parents aren't perfect, that, you know, the people that we grew up idolizing, they have their problems just like everyone else, and they don't have all of the answers. So, and that can be a hard realization to come to, you know, I mean, at least it was for me. I'll say that. That can be a hard realization to come to. And this book more focused on that really than anything else. And there was definitely a twist at the end that made me really emotional. So yeah, but once again, I don't know. I think I probably, if I had gone into the book without the expectation of what I thought the book was going to be, then maybe I would have given it a higher rating, because it was a good book. And I did enjoy it, but it just was not at all what I expected it to be. So next is a book that I listened to, an audiobook, and it was the first in a series, the Mr. Max series, and this one was called The Book of Lost Things. So this book follows, and I gave it what did I give it? I gave it a 4. So this book was actually quite fun. And it followed Max, who is a 13-year-old boy, I believe, yes. And he is the only son of a couple of actors who are just larger than life personalities. And they end up getting invited to go overseas and, you know, it's this whole trip that they're planning to go to. And Max inadvertently gets left behind. And he ends up having to live with his grandmother who can't really afford to take care of him. And so he's trying to figure out a way to kind of make some money to help contribute. And at the same time, like, he's wondering how or why his parents ended up leaving on this trip without him. And then he starts to kind of become concerned. He and his grandmother become concerned that maybe this trip wasn't what it was expected to be, and that possibly his parents are in some sort of danger. Meanwhile, all this is going on. He's, like I said, trying to find some ways to contribute financially to the household. And he kind of starts to discover that he is really good at finding lost things. And so he kind of becomes this sort of pseudo detective, and he's going around solving all these like mysteries around the neighborhood and trying to find lost things for, I think it's $50 per lost thing that he's charging. The book really reminded me of Welcome to Night Vale for some reason. I want to say, I almost think it has to be the same narrator that narrated both books. I listened to them both on audiobook. And I think it almost has to be the same narrator because it just reminded me of that so much. And I don't know if it was the narrator or if it was the writing style that was similar, but I really, really enjoyed it. It was really fun. And I'm actually really looking forward to the next book. So next was a book by Camilla Sten and Alexandra Fleming called The Resting Place. And this one was a thriller, and it was a really, really cool premise for a book. So basically our main character suffers from a condition known as it's got like basically face blindness. So she can't recognize people at all. Like even like her grandmother who she grew up with, she can't recognize her. So she kind of learns to recognize people by their face markers. So if like somebody has a particularly like striking hairstyle or something, then that she can associate with the person to figure out who the person is. Or if they have like a really large nose or something like that, she finds face markers with people to try to figure out who they are, but she can't just recognize somebody off the street. If she's, met you once, she's not going to remember who you are if she sees you even an hour later. So it's kind of cool. I don't know if that actually is a real thing or not, or if that was just made up for the book, but basically she ends up witnessing, well, I guess she wasn't there for the murder, but basically she goes to her grandmother's house, and she passes and she ends up finding her grandmother murdered on the floor. But when she goes into the building, she actually passes the murderer. And so she ends up obviously being very, very scared because she realizes that this murderer has seen her and knows that she has seen the murderer, but she doesn't know if the murderer knows that she won't be able to recognize the murderer, right? So she's kind of living in this state of fear where anybody around her at any time could be the murderer, and this person could be coming back to murder her, just because she has seen them, not realizing that she can't go to the authorities and say this is what this person looks like. So she's dealing with that, and then she's also dealing with the fallout of her grandmother's estate. There is some background that we find out, about her growing up, about her grandmother, and it alternates between two perspectives. So she ends up going to this estate that her grandmother has left her. It is a huge house that she has never been to before, which is one of my favorite tropes in horror books, is being left like an old creepy house in a will. And so we have that element here, and we kind of get to see what happens when she goes to this house to, deal with, the reading of the will and whatnot, and, differing up of what happened with the grandmother when she lived in the house years beforehand. So it was definitely a really, really interesting thriller. With a unique kind of spin on it, with not being able to, knowing who the killer was, seeing the killer but not being able to recognize the killer, is definitely a unique spin on the story, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4. Next is a book that I've been wanting to read for a while, and that is Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand, and this one I also gave a 4. I really, really enjoyed it. So we have a cast of characters that comes together and kind of defies the odds. So basically there is these 3 girls. I don't even know how to explain this story. We've got these 3 girls that end up kind of coming together in a way that they did not expect. This deals with kind of supernatural powers, as well as serial killers on the loose, that sort of thing. So there's they're in this town. There's girls that have gone missing in this town. you know, every so many years for back and back and back and back and back in the day. Every few years there's girls that end up going missing, and it almost seems as though these girls are being like offered up, you know, maybe in some sort of ritual sort of thing, and the cops can never figure out who is doing this, if it's a serial killer, what's going on. And we have these three girls that kind of are at the center of this sort of mystery, I guess we'll say. And I really, really liked that, you know, the book features girls of completely different backgrounds kind of coming together and overcoming adversities, A, and B, working together even though they may not like each other or what each other has done. They end up having to work together to kind of fight evil, I guess we'll say. And this book was really, really like pro-woman. It has a lot of like feminist tones to it, which I really, really enjoyed. And I think especially nowadays with what's going on, you know, like in the States and stuff like that, like it's just, I really enjoyed reading this because it made me feel good about being a woman, and it made me feel very empowered, which was not something that I expected to get from this book, but I was really happy that I got. The next two books are cozy mysteries from Maya P. Manansala, and that is Arsenic and Adobo and its sequel, Homicide and Halo Halo. So I really wanted to check this one out because this one has been all over BookTube. I think so many people have read Arsenic and Adobo and have given it really high ratings, so I wanted to pick it up as well. I think I gave Arsenic and Adobo a 3. I think I gave them both a 3. Yes, I gave them both a 3. What I really, really liked is I liked that it really to see more of the Filipino culture, and I really enjoyed that. I used to work with a Filipino girl who I absolutely just adored. I just adored her so much, and I miss her so much. And it just like I listened to this on an audiobook, and a lot of the times the narrator just reminded me of her so much, and I just like was smiling all the way through it because it reminded me of my friend that I used to work with, who I don't get to talk to unfortunately that often anymore. But you know, it's a typical cozy mystery. I will say, like, the mystery wasn't as good as some cozy mysteries that I have read, but what I really enjoyed about it was the Filipino culture, and like some of the recipes, some of the food that they talked about, because I love Filipino food. And so, I mean, that's half the thing with most of these cozy mysteries is all about the food, right? And this one, it really is all about the food because it's centered around a restaurant. So I did overall enjoy it. I have read cozy mysteries that I liked a lot more, and I will leave a recommendation here somewhere. I did a video about the top 5 cozy mysteries that I've read recently. So I'll leave that link in the description box below or up in an iCard. But overall, I gave these both a 3. And the last book that I'm going to talk about today is called Skydive by Mark C. Hull. And I was actually approached by an Instagram account that is working for promoting this book. And they asked if I'd be interested in reading the book and giving it some reviews. So I said yes. And this is not a book that I normally would read. Like, this is not a genre that I typically would read, but I'm actually really happy that I did. And like, I'm really interested in doing more of this kind of stuff in the future because it kind of gets me into maybe reading something I typically wouldn't read, right? And this one basically follows our main character. I mean, it's, I guess not even a character, it's a nonfiction book. Basically, Mark just kind of has gone through and given some of his best stories that he has from working as a bartender in an airline. And he was a very lucky soul, was in charge of working as a bartender for kind of like one of the Sky Lounges. So these are all like really big, important, you know, flyers who have important, impressive jobs, who are rich and famous and whatever. And he has all of these customer service stories, which I think that this book, if you have ever worked in customer service, in retail, anything like that, this book is definitely for you because it just makes you realize you're not the only one. You know, like I worked in retail for years and years and years and years, and I was just laughing as I was reading this because the stories are funny, first of all. It's like kind of a comedy book, right? The stories are really funny and they're so relatable, and it just made me remember so many of my own customers' horror stories. And it just made me laugh because like a lot of times people suck when you're working in those industries, and it's just kind of funny to hear other people's stories about the same thing that you've gone through as well. So overall, I gave that one a 3, and I really enjoyed reading something that I typically wouldn't read. It kind of gave me a break from all the thriller and horror stuff that I like to surround myself with on the daily. All right, you guys, so those are the books that I have read so far in July. So that concludes my wrap up. Let me know in the comments down below if you have read any of those books and what your thoughts on them were. Or if even just by hearing them, if you're gonna add them to your TBR, I wanna know that too. So on your way out, if you have not done so, I would really appreciate hitting the subscribe button and maybe giving me a like or a comment. It really helps to push the video into YouTube's algorithm. So anyways, I hope you guys are having an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!